Hey guys, welcome to another live show. Yeah, guys, like and subscribe, get in the chat. Let me know how you guys are thinking and feeling. I'm not sure what just happened there. Oh, I don't know what just happened. Anyways, as you guys can tell, I am frazzled. Just give me a second. It's been a crazy ass morning, but all right. On today's show, we're going to talk about Kimmich. Arsenal have been linked to Joshua Kimmich from Bayern Munich. We're going to talk about Tomiyasu's new deal. Miles Lewis-Skelly being integrated into the team as a left back, and some other stuff that you guys want to talk about. I'm sure there's other things. Oh, yeah. And Timber being available. I couldn't have forgotten that, So make sure you guys are smashing the likes, all that kind of stuff. Oh, my mic is not even. Can you hear me? Okay, so yeah, we're fully into the international break, and I can't wait for this shit to be over. I'm taking a little bit of a break. It's kind of like, okay, yeah, like I know that the last 10 or so games in the Premier League are going to be like super stressful, so I'm like kind of okay with this break, but at the same time it's like the international break brings out like the worst in football fans. I mean, I'm surprised I haven't seen the Scholes, Lampard, Gerrard debate. People are going into like long essays and stuff like that about how Cole Palmer needs to replace Saka, all this kind of shit. And I'm just like, can we just get back to the football? Because this brings out the worst in people. They talk about nonsense and it's just like, but it gives us a time to sit and reflect on the season. And so so Cannon Club, we are recording, and that episode will be available tomorrow morning. And we're actually going to predict the last 10 games, among some other things. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff, but then we're going to predict the last 10 games. And then, like you guys asked, we're doing a live with Gunnar Lee and Delita Gunnar tomorrow at 4 p.m. UK time. And we are going to do a sell bench start for, the Arsenal team. So we are going to get a chance to reflect on some shows. And so, yeah, but let's get into the mess. Seth, thank you so much for your super chat. Says Kimmich is 5 times the player Rice is. Bring him on. Not sure he's 5 times the player Rice is. If he was, then why would Bayern Munich want him? Bayern Munich were desperate for Declan Rice, but they couldn't get him. So it's kind of like, well, if Kimmich is 5 times the player, then why would they want him? So I think, they would complement each other quite well because Kimmich is not a 6. And so we'll talk about that. Ambrose says, what other midfield options are there on the table? I'm sure Kimmich is not the only transfer target. We've been linked to Zubamendi and Amadou Onana, but the two of them are so incredibly different. And I do feel like Arsenal are going to look at what players they lose in the summer window. I think that will give us like a really good, if you keep Jorginho, then you don't need another deep line playmaker because Jorginho is there, right? If Partey leaves, then you'll probably need somebody to bring a little bit more of that, like that steel in midfield and that athleticism. So I think some of those things will play a part. But ultimately, if Arsenal do bring in a midfielder, I really hope that they go big, bring in somebody with, and we'll talk about this in regards to Kimmich. And we need a number 8/6, somebody that can, even maybe play with Jorginho, can give Declan Rice a rest, maybe in like lower, like not as stressful games. I would prefer us to bring in somebody with Champions League experience, somebody with experience at the highest level. I don't really feel like Arsenal need any more young players that need development. We have enough of those, so I would love like a Frankie de Jong / Kimmich to come in, because I feel like those are the right things. Somebody that's a good passer, those types of things are super important for our midfield. So yeah, for me, like, I think that like Arsenal need to look into bringing in a big midfield signing. And I would say that like, if I had to sacrifice this, if I had to say which position needed more experience, I would say midfield over the forward position. I think we could, I'd prefer to, if we had to choose, to bring in a experienced midfielder and do a project striker than vice versa. I just feel like the midfield has been crying out for somebody with the experience, the know-how, the quality, and so I want us to get that right for sure. Yeah, let's see what else you guys are saying. Um, Cedric says, don't want Kimmich, no thanks. Fabi says, don't know about Kimmich to be fair. Jack Lee says, yeah, Kimmich has 10 years of first team football on that body. Jack Lee says, like buying a BMW with 200,000 miles. I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure if I like agree with the idea that like bringing in somebody that has like experience is super important. We don't have a lot of experience in this team, so why would we bring in somebody else that needs time? We already have a team that lacks that. We went into this Champions League campaign feeling as though we didn't have a lot of experience. So why would we bring in somebody that also doesn't have it? I mean, you could look at somebody like Douglas Luiz, who could do some, can play that similar role, but he literally has no experience in the Champions League, none. And I feel like that's what we need to be looking at. So I don't know if it's a negative thing that somebody that we would bring in would have like 10 years of experience playing at the highest level. I think more of the experience factor than like oh, he's going to break down in a couple of months, because we don't actually know that, So, yeah, but I kind of get it. But this whole like every single time we buy a player, they have to be young and inexperienced and need time to get into, like, for me, it's like we don't really need that. And we're also looking for somebody to replace probably Thomas Partey. And so you probably want to bring in an experienced player. I don't know. I'm very, 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 very keen to bring in somebody that knows how to win. Next season, if you thought the pressure to win the Premier League or the Champions League is big this season, think about what it's going to be next season. And what's going to help us do that is more experience at the top level. Arca says Kimmich is great, but 50 million for a 29-year-old when it'll be about 275,000 pounds seems a bit much. Fair enough. That's a fair enough argument. Um, I think there's always scope to bring in somebody with experience, and 50 million is the going rate for a good midfielder. So you're not going to get Kimmich for 20. 50 million is, kind of like the standard, so it's not like you're spending 100 million, but I kind of get what you guys are saying with that. Carol says, we could do with someone with UCL experience. He's won a lot. It's not even just experience, is he's won things before, and we don't have a lot of people in our team right now that we can say genuinely has won anything at the top level except for Jorginho and Kai Havertz. I'm really trying to think who else? Jesus and Zinchenko. But again, like even with their level of experience, it's more being a cog in the wheel or a part of a machine that probably would have won whether they were there or not, as harsh as that sounds. Kimmich has been fundamental and key to a lot of Bayern's most recent success. So I feel like it is a different level of experience that we truly lack in our team. But when I look across Europe and I'm like, okay, who can we bring in? I don't really think we need to bring in an Onana. I feel like that is just so a sideways step for us. Bringing in Zubamendi would be great in terms of like a standard option, but like he doesn't offer the experience and the winning and all that kind of stuff. I feel like if we're gonna go big, we need to go with somebody that's been there and done it before. That's kind of what I'm thinking. But that's just me. Um, that's just me. Let's actually take a look at Kimmich's injury record. That will give me a better, feeling on like, you guys know how I am. I don't want anybody that has had like multiple ACLs or so many, muscle injuries. Those types of things really do scare me. And he is older. Like you guys have said, first in 29 is not old in football anymore, but that's neither here nor there. I just don't really belong to the don't buy anybody that's over 22 thing that some Arsenal fans seem to be obsessed with. And I also feel like having a consistently young team also gives that like, yeah, well, we have the youngest team, and I'm not really that obsessed with that. I prefer to just like win shit. And I feel like it's hard to win things without experience. Um, I don't think experience is overrated. Some people do. Um, let's see. So I'm looking at his injury record now just to let you guys know. Most of his injuries or times out for Bayern have been through illness. This season he's been sick twice, and he's missed 4 games. He's missed 4 games for Bayern and a total of 20 days altogether. So he had a shoulder injury, that he came back from in February, but his injury record looks good. His injury record looks good. Um, like, if we were to bring in him, I wouldn't be, like, too worried because 'cause I'm trying to see, like I see a meniscus damage in December 2020 that kept him out for 13 games, but we're in 2024 now, and since then, there's been very little like, he's had influenza, quarantine, coronavirus, fitness issue, coronavirus, there's not really a lot there in terms of, like, unavailability, so, you can't always predict it. We know with Thomas Partey that, that you can't always predict it, but what I wouldn't like to do is go into it knowing that you're buying somebody that is injury prone. So, yeah. Just speaking a little bit about Kimmich's, position. I know that I think some people have um, a misconception that he's like a DM or something like that. He's definitely not a DM. I think that's why Bayern wanted to bring in Declan Rice is so that they could play together, so that they could get Kimmich into better positions. And he also is somebody that can play fullback, but more in the inverted fullback position that we've seen so often. We have that a lot, in our team where we play with an inverted fullback, whether they're a midfielder or a defend or a center back, Arteta chooses. But Kimmich could be somebody that could do that right back inverted thing that he was trying to do with Thomas Partey that did not work. Um, I just think Thomas Partey lacks he lacks the agility a little bit to play in that position. It didn't quite work. It was clunky. Maybe if we had continued doing it, it would have got smoother over time. But if Arteta does want to deploy that and have that option, Kimmich would be a good option for that because he can do the inverted role there. So yeah, it's very it's an interesting link because I do feel like we're in a position where we could attract somebody like Kimmich, where a couple of seasons ago we couldn't because we don't have Champions League. But you know, I don't have a problem with bringing in experienced players that have won things before, and I just don't see that many options out there that are attainable and bring that level of quality. A lot of the players that people speak about to me just don't really have that. I'm seeing a lot of João Neves in the comments. I haven't watched a lot of him. I know he's like very hyped by the football Twitter space, if that makes sense. So I haven't watched enough of him to say whether that's somebody that we should be bringing in. But again, you'd be talking about somebody that is maybe not so much a project, but lacks the experience that I feel like Arsenal are sorely needing now. So that's just me. Just to Jay says, I don't want it to be a Casemiro type situation, a top player whose golden years are gone, and he's massive wages. That'd be up to, I guess, Arsenal to figure out whether or not that's a risk, that they're willing to take. Michael says Kimmich definitely feels like that big club signing that a lot of the European teams do when they're in a pinch. I'm a fan. Fabi says you can be young and have experience, though, Jess. You can, but some of the players that people are talking about don't have that. They just don't, João Neves doesn't have that, so if you guys can name me somebody that's 22, 23 years old, that's attainable, that we could bring in, that has that, let me know who that is. But I feel like you'd be really like struggling to find it because they don't really exist. We have like, I don't know. I'm really trying to think of somebody that has the experience that is attainable for us. Um, you guys can maybe name them. I can't. Arcot says, as someone who has a few Bayern fans as friends, people are saying they hate him are wrong. They are frustrated with him wanting to play DM when he clearly doesn't have the positional intelligence for it. Nuances of Fate says Kimmich is basically a right back off the pace who now plays DM. So basically, where Declan plays for 60 million on very high wages on a position we're covered. Honestly, I hope we stay away. I don't necessarily feel like I feel like the last couple of times or like years before like Tuchel came in and stuff. I don't feel like Kimmich always played right back. I felt like he was playing more like in the 8 role, and because they don't have a number 6 that they trust, they've dropped him back to try to fill that role, and it doesn't work. And so when I have seen him pushed up a little bit further, he has a good pass on him for sure. And so yeah, I think he'd be a good option, but I do feel like there's a little bit of recency bias here, and I also feel like we have this thing too about like we like players that are really hyped that don't I don't know if they actually are as good as people are saying they are. And we also have this like idea that because we're in the Premier League and we're Arsenal, that somehow players from Bayern Munich are like not good enough for us or they're overrated or something like that. And I'm just like, we will probably see sooner rather than later that Bayern Munich, as much as they're struggling in the Bundesliga right now, they have some real quality players. And so we shouldn't really get like, I feel like sometimes we have a little bit too much we're a little arrogant, and so like to say like I wouldn't take Kimmich feels a little like we think we're something that we're not, but that's just me. I don't think he's washed. I don't think he's too old. I think people saying that 29 is too old are a little bit like, think about some of the best players that we brought in over the years have not been 19, so this whole young team thing, I don't know. Tabuki says, I think Kimmich is much different to Casemiro as he relies less on his mobility in comparison to Casemiro, who age better similar to Jorginho. Let's see. Lionide says Kimmich is heading down a difficult path nowadays, lost his mojo. Yeah, you could say that, or you could say that he's playing under Tuchel and Tuchel's playing him out of position, and everybody at Bayern Munich looks like shit right now. You could say that. I don't know. I'm not good. I'm not going to turn down Kimmich. I just don't feel like we're in a position to be like, and when the other options are Onana, and people are trying to convince me that like Onana would be a better choice, like I'm a little bit like, I don't know about that, y'all. Alistair Ben says, I think Paulinia at Fulham has Prem and Champions League experience. The only thing about like, first of all, people would take Paulinia because he's from the Premier League. They would take him, and even though he's 29, they would renege on the age comment because he's in the Premier League. But he was going to be brought in to play next to Kimmich. I do think that he's been led astray, really. Like, were you guys paying attention to McAllister playing in the 6th role for Liverpool earlier on in the season? A lot of like Liverpool fans were really frustrated with him because they were like, is he good? Is he not? Then when he started playing in the 8 role, once they got Endo, he looked a lot better. I do think they're playing him out of position, but I know a lot of people are like, we've gotten so used to buying young players and we're so afraid that people are going to break down that we don't want anybody over the age of 22. But this team really lacks true experience and know-how and winning at the top level. And if we're going to buy somebody in midfield, I just don't want another kid. I just feel like unless it's something that you just can't turn down, like another Bruno Guimaraes situation or, something like that, then I do feel like you probably should veer more into the experience category. Because when you're talking about these Onanas and stuff like that, I'm starting to look at you a little sideways. Like, okay. Let's see. Football 14 says Kimmich plays as a number 6. He rarely plays as a number 8. The guy is similar to Jorginho. The main position is right back. The idea of playing him in number 8, I don't get. He's similar to Douglas Luiz, Bruno Guimaraes. Well, where do those two players play? if you're saying that he's similar to Douglas Luiz and Bruno Guimaraes, where do those two players play? Bruno Guimaraes has played a long time at Newcastle in the 6 role, not because they view him as a 6, but because they just haven't bought one. So we're talking about a 6/8, and same with Douglas Luiz. Like, he can play as a number 6, but he also plays with Kamara. But if Kamara's not there, what do? You have to play him in the 6. So I actually feel like you're proving my point even more by saying he's similar to Douglas Luiz and Bruno Guimaraes, who are two players and two profiles I feel like we need. So, I mean, thank you, Football 14. You're making my point even more. Like, it's a 6/8, somebody that can pick a pass, somebody that's a true midfielder. And if you could add experience on the top of that, I don't really see why people would be so against the signing. I don't get it. I feel like his stocks are not high right now. I feel like that's more what it is than anything. It's like his stocks are just not high, but if you're telling me that he's similar to Douglas Luiz and Bruno Guimaraes, then he's actually perfect to partner Declan Rice. If you're saying he's similar to Jorginho, then he's perfect to partner Declan Rice, which is what we're talking about, right? So you're making my point, actually. So yeah, thank you so much for that. Jordan Hill says people also need to look at Bayern for the last past 1.5 years as an anomaly. They've literally won the past 11 years in sudden change in coach and internal politics change, and suddenly they're trash. I'm just not really getting it. I feel like we, as Arsenal fans, get a little, I don't want to say, I feel like we should be confident and feel like we're going in the right direction, but like, I'm not really like beyond Eric Dyer or Goretzka or some of their bummy players. I'm not really going to be turning down Bayern players like that. I can understand the age argument, but again, we just don't really need more kids. If we move on from Thomas Partey, the last thing we need to do is to replace him with a child. So we have enough young players. Our 2 starting wingers are 22. We have enough young players. Like, we don't need more. Like, I don't get it. Let's see. Lionite says, one thing for sure, Kimmich is made of hardwood, no problem. With the Premier League physicality. That's another thing that, I think about for sure. Khaled says, in Europe, we cannot underestimate Bayern Munich. I kind of feel that way. I feel like, not that there's going to be, I don't feel like we're just going to get like ran over by Bayern Munich, but I do think that there's going to be a reality check for some Arsenal fans that feel like because Bayern Munich are in a poor, like, or in a bad place right now for their standards, that we're just going to run over them because we're top of the Premier League. I genuinely feel like we don't understand that, like, that shit really doesn't matter. Like, that really doesn't matter. Like, you're going to have to play against Sane, who's a good player, Kane, who's a good player, Kimmich, who's a good player. Like, these are Musiala, these guys are not bums, you guys. So, I'm just putting it out there. Plastic Bag says ideal summer would be Gyökeres and Kimmich. I like those 2 signings. Those would make me happy, but I also like understand that there's, some people might want somebody with that's more like I don't feel like there's a lot, like, I feel like some people are coming around to Gyökeres, but I do feel like there's like an underlying that some people want like an Osimhen, or they want a name that is going to spark like a and I like names. I like names. I like stars. I like things like that. But Gyökeres just looks the business. He would be my choice for the summer signing because, again, he's not a child. He's probably ready to make the next step. He wouldn't be a project. He would cost quite a bit, like a good chunk of money. But, that would be a good summer to me. But I know some people are like hell bent on like get a Osimhen or whatever. I also saw that we're linked to Isak too, which is interesting. We can talk about that too while we're here. Jack Lee says Brahim Diaz, Zubamendi, and Gyökeres. Brahim Diaz is an interesting one too because he looks the business. He can play in the number 10 role, and he can also play off of the wing, which kind of makes me like, if there is a link there, I feel like it'd be because he can play on the wing. I don't envision him playing in our midfield, especially because Arteta's a little bit more safety first. So yeah, But he looks like a good player, and I like Real Madrid leftovers. They work out well for us. So, but I don't know enough about him. So there's that. Travis says Jokeris and Fofana for me. Kimmich would be good if we lose both Jorginho and Partey. Yeah, I feel like I feel like I feel like maybe if we lose both, but I feel like even if we lose one, like I don't want to replace an experienced player with a kid. I just have like a big an aversion to it. I don't think it's the right way to squad plan for this group, but I kind of hear your point on that one too. Let's see. Arca says, I see a lot of people talking about Diaz. Does the story have legs? I don't know if it does, if I'm honest. And I don't think that he wants to leave. And I feel like he's going to end up being like a Ceballos or a Vasquez. For people that are telling me that he doesn't play on the wings, the reason why I said that he plays on the wings is because the last couple of times that I watched him play, he played on the wing. So I'm not really sure where that's coming from. Um, in fact, like I can show you. Um, I try to do at least like a bare minimum, bit of research before I, try to say anything. And one of the last times that I watched Real Madrid play, dude was on the wing. Oh, I don't know like, I can show you guys if you guys want to see, but um if you guys want to say that he's not a natural winger, I feel like that's a better way to put it. But last time I checked, that's the wing. Is that not Brahim Diaz that's playing on the right? And the other time that I saw was in the Champions League, he played on the left. So if you're saying that he's more of a creative forward than a natural winger, that makes a little bit more sense than he doesn't play on the wing because he quite literally did play on the wing. I don't know. So I don't know what to tell you. Let's see. Ambrose says Diaz plays 8, 10, and left wing. Yes. Um, so yeah, Diaz is an interesting player. I feel like he would be the answer to maybe not going for Pedro Neto because Neto is injury prone, which I could understand that. And he could also cover, those other positions like we spoke about, can kind of do a Trossardi type of role for us too. So I can see that. I just feel like he's not somebody that's going to want to leave Real Madrid. I think you'd have to like get him kicking and screaming, to be honest. CE says Diaz can play along the front three. Exactly. Nuances of Fate says Diaz played right wing primarily at AC Milan. He's played wing most of his career. I feel like because the number 10 is not really, it's coming back, like everything comes back in style, just like 90s like clothes and stuff like that, right? But I feel like because the number 10 is not as popular of a position as it was back in the day, like when Ozil was, king and all that kind of stuff, is in order to get that stability in midfield, teams move their number 10s to the wings. And so that's where you get like the Brahim Diaz's and stuff like that. Instead of playing him in midfield, they'll play like two more DMs or like actual number 8s or whatever in midfield. And I think we kind of play like that too. And I think we're at our best when we play like that. I feel there's when we play two number 10s, I never feel like we're more attacking. Does that make sense? Like on paper, it's more attacking, but I actually feel like we're more attacking when we have like Jorginho, Declan, and Odegaard, which doesn't have two number 10s in it. So, I'm okay with that. I actually like the way that we play when we have those players in midfield, and then all of our attack kind of comes from those attacking players. So, yeah. Nico says Diaz came out of the City Academy with Sancho and Foden. He looks like a really good player. Like I haven't watched him. Like I don't know everything about him, but he does look like a good player. Um, and I can see why we'd be linked to him. I just don't know if it's a strong link. There's 200 of you guys in here. Make sure you guys smash the likes and get into the chat. Let me know what you guys are thinking and feeling. We're going to talk about this for a little bit longer. I want to get to some more of these comments about Kimmich and Diaz. If you guys want to talk about it, whatever. Kind of talk about some striker stuff too. Then I kind of want to move on to I want to talk about Timber and Tommy too. So get in the chat. I needed that coffee so bad. Xander Raptor says Diaz is a Foden type player. That's an interesting comp. That's an interesting comp. You know, you have like Javi Simmons, I think also can do that kind of role too. Like they're not like wingers, they're like more creative forwards, but they have enough like burst and skill to like get beyond their mark and stuff like that. So I feel that a lot. Jordan Hill says, Arsenal would you like want Arsenal to sign Gyökeres? Yes, I would. I certainly would. I absolutely would. Mr. Happy says Kimmich's best days are behind him. Bayern have got the best years out of him, in my opinion. We should be looking for the next CM we can base our midfield around for the next five years. I kind of hear that, but we have two midfielders that we're doing that with, so I don't think every single midfielder needs to be that. Again, like 29 is not that old. You can at least get 3 or 4 good years out of him if you manage him correctly. And like I've already said, like his injury record is really good. So the idea that just because you're older means you can't play a lot of minutes is a little, for me. But if you guys can name somebody that's actually attainable, that has the same level of quality, if not more, um, name them. But I feel like we're gonna be really like Bruno Guimaraes is not a realistic option for us. Like getting him from Newcastle is gonna be next to impossible. And I feel like when they do sell him, if and when they will sell him out of England, they will sell him to, one of the other clubs, a PSG, somebody like that. I just don't see him, leaving Newcastle next season to come to us. Douglas Luiz, as good as he looks, does not have experience at the top level. And so, like, I don't, I don't really see him being that much better than Kimmich. Zubamendi is a really good option. So, um, if you guys can name them, I just don't see why we wouldn't even like consider it. Um, so yeah, Nuances of Fate says he can play with both feet, extremely skillful. If Madrid sign Mbappe, then they may want to open up a spot. I agree. I agree that somebody will be available. We just don't know who that will be. But if I had to guess, it'd probably be the guy that they sent out on loan. Like it'll probably be him. I don't see it being Valverde or Camavinga or Chouameni. I think they have big plans for those guys. So yeah, I think that somebody will be available, whether or not you can get him out of Madrid. That's he just got there. Like he literally just got there. Artie says, I don't rate Brahim Diaz. He never proved his expectations, even in Milan, who refused to buy him. Plus, Diaz is quite an injury prone player. Well, if he's injury prone, I don't want him. You know that I can't do it. I can't do it. So, yeah, that's interesting. Interesting. Dale says, when thinking about summer transfers, do you have a budget in mind? Like I would say, like I feel like we always have like 150, something around there, and so I'm thinking 2 big signings, and then anything else would come from sales. That's what I'm thinking. I don't think we're gonna have like a 5, 6 signing summer this summer. I don't think we'll have as big of a summer as we did last summer because to have 2 summers like that, I feel like would be insane. And I do think we just have to see what the sales look like, but I think like I usually think like around 150 and something else comes from sales and like I'm thinking yeah, something around there, if that makes sense. But I really like Gyökeres a lot. Isak is also an interesting one. I did see something from Dean Jones saying that Newcastle are going to have to fight tooth and nail to keep Isak, and Arsenal are most likely to be the suitors in the summer. Um, I just hate his injury record. If he didn't have the injury record, I would say yes, absolutely. He's just such a sick note. Um, so I would probably go for Gyökeres. I also don't like Osimhen for the same reason. He's injury prone. So yeah, Gyökeres for me would be the striker that I would go for. Negotiating outside of the release clause, just like Ben Jacobs says, like anybody that's buying Osimhen is not going to pay the release clause. I feel like it'll be the exact same thing with Gyökeres. You can always negotiate outside of the release clause. And I feel like that's what we would need to do in order to get that deal done and then buy a big midfield signing. And also Also, um, the defender situation will be interesting too. The the defender situation will be interesting too because I did see that Arsenal wanna buy a defender. I'm just trying to figure out if we actually have to do that, like, or if that could be on the back burner a little bit. We'll talk about that in just a second. The Arsenal perspective says we cannot be splashing cash like the last few summer windows. We need to temper the spending because we don't need it. Nico says that's bullshit. He played for Milan. Madrid just wanted him back. Talking about Brahim Diaz. Ayanle says Frankie de Jong is coming to Arsenal. I could feel it in my bones. Same feeling I had about Rice when no one believed. Nuances of Fate says Javi Simmons and Frankie de Jong. I would take Frankie de Jong like too. Like I just feel like experience 6/8. I want somebody that has the winning experience, played at the top level, something. So Kimmich and Frankie de Jong fit that for me more than like a Douglas Luiz who he's good in the Prem. Like, and we need to think about more than just being good in the Prem. There's 200 of you guys in here. Smash the likes. Plastic Bag says the budget question is silly. It's not our money. It's KSE's money. Just get the best players who fit and let the owners worry about the dollars. I don't know if it's so much about like worrying about it, but like when we start talking about transfer targets, I do think that like being realistic about who Arsenal is and what we usually would spend and what financial situation we're in allows the conversation to be a lot more realistic. If we start saying who cares about, it's the Cronkies' money, I feel like then we start having stupid conversations where we're like, think we're going to spend 100 million on Osimhen, we think we're going to spend 75 million on De Jong, we think we're going to go to Sporting and take Diamande for 80 million. I feel like having just like a rough figure in your head allows the conversation to not go into Sillyville, and I feel like that's more what it is not, you know, it's not so much about like worry, like it's the Cronkies, money and we shouldn't be worrying, but like I don't really feel like we should be having conversations where we're like, yeah, so go out there and get Osimhen for 100 million, then turn around and buy Leao for 100 million, then turn around and buy Frankie de Jong for like, because we know we're not going to do that, So I feel like that's the reason why we have rough figures in our head, if that makes sense. And I think, like I said, like 2 big signings, maybe 1 smaller one. I feel like, and the further that we get into if the further we get into these conversations, the more I feel like we're gonna get either a striker or a winger. That's I just I just have this feeling that we're going to do one or the other because we have, and the reason why I feel that way is because 1, I don't feel like we're gonna sell Jesus. And so if you don't sell Gabby Jesus, then he effectively becomes an option on the wing. And so if you buy a big striker, Jesus can play on the wing. If you buy a winger, then they'll just continue to play Kai, Trossard, and Jesus. So yeah, I actually don't think we'll do both. I think they'll pick based on how the rest of the season goes. Because again, Kai Havertz is important in these conversations because I just don't see Arteta. Arteta really likes Kai Havertz. You can just feel it. You can feel it. You can see it. It's obvious. And so I just feel like if we decide not to get a striker, then Kai is going to be our first option at false 9. Because again, we did give him £275,000 per week and we spent 65 million on him. That's not necessarily the type of money that Arsenal spend on a bit part player. So I genuinely do feel like we're going to get a defender no matter what. It wouldn't be my choice, but like no matter what, the defender's coming in. What I mean by a defender coming in and it wouldn't be my choice is like it wouldn't be as big of a priority to me as it is for Arteta, but we know Arteta's like defense first, defender, midfielder, and one of a striker, a winger. That's what I think is going to happen. So yeah, our tech child arc. Yeah, Brahim says we'll cover for Saka. Ghani says I'm gonna be real. If we're starting with 150 and we sell Eddie, Reese, and Ramsdale, that's a decent amount to spend. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. Something around there. Justin J says Osimhen, Zubamendi, Hato. Hold on, guys. Hello? Ciao. Ciao. The phone calls, and sometimes they be important, Loki, and I gotta answer them. Okay, sorry, y'all. Let's keep going. Let's see. I saw Fabi ask, "What would you do, Jess?" It depends on what we. It depends on what we do. It depends on who's available. We have to get the midfielder. I think it's so important. So the midfielder for me would be a super big important, like needs to be like a big signing. Um, and then between a striker and a winger, if I'm like, okay, well the options are like, let's say our options are Diaz, Javi Simmons, like meaning like more like flexible options, or Nico Williams or Pedro Neto, or go get Jokeris or uh Osimhen. I think I'd go striker. I still feel like I'd go striker. Striker, midfielder, defender. I don't know. It's so hard. It's so hard. I'm glad I'm not making the decision. I'm glad I'm not making the decision because all I know for a fact is that I want a midfielder. But on any given day, I could be like, well, I just, we're scoring so many goals that I'm like, okay, well, do we need the striker? But I feel like we do. I feel like we do, you know? So yeah, we got to get the striker and then we can move Jesus to the wing, you know? Because I feel like I like the winger options less than I like the striker options, if that makes sense. So, oh, yeah, we got to get the striker, don't we? The Arsenal perspective says shopping list Jokeris and Diamande. I'll leave the midfielder to for you to fill in. Um, yeah, it's the midfielder situation is hard too because it's like, yeah, we need to get the midfielder and it needs to be right and it needs to be a 6/10 or 6/8. And there's good players that can play in that position, but some are not attainable. So somebody between Kimmich, Frankie De Jong, Zubamendi, and Douglas Luiz, one of that group. One of that group. So yeah, Travis says, I heard Bayern want Zinni. I've seen this rumor as well. I do feel like if they were to offer something decent, meaning like anything above like 35 million, you'd have to do it. Just because Zinchenko is also quite injury prone, and there's other players that could fill that position that are already doing it, like Kiwi, Tommy, Timber will all fill that position. And also, there's the rumors of MLS being integrated into the Arsenal first team as a left back, like an inverted left back. So, there needs to be a spot for him to step into. So, yeah, if Bayern Munich were to come and ask for Zinchenko and they were to offer something 35 million or above, I feel like you'd have to take it. As much as I wouldn't be shopping him around, sometimes you have to sell before it's obvious to sell, right? And I feel like we're getting into that territory with Zinchenko and Jesus a little bit, where they obviously can play big roles and they would be great for the squad. But like if Napoli were to say like, "Hey, we want to buy Jesus for 60 million," you have to sell, right? And so it's just a matter of selling before it becomes obvious, right? So speaking of defender options, the best news that I saw before today. I mean, Tommy's we knew already. Tommy is getting a new deal. That was great, but that Timber, barring any setbacks, will be available for the Arsenal squad after the international break. That is amazing news. Do I expect him to start? No. Do I expect him to play a major role? Probably not. But it is nice to know that he'll be available for selection and hopefully he does get selected. It's just a massive boost, for Arsenal. And so I'm happy about that for sure. A few things to keep in mind is that when players come back from ACLs, they tend to get muscle injuries. So please don't be surprised if, he plays a couple minutes and he's down. Um, but yeah, like Timber coming back in is super like positive for us. And then Tommy getting the new deal, I feel like is something that I was a little bit um sour about, not because I felt like I would pull it, but just because like what kind of deal is it? It's an extension until 2026. It's not the big one like Ben got, which I think symbolizes how Arsenal view the two players. They view Ben as a long-term member of the squad, so his deal goes until 2028, where Tommy's goes until 2026 with an option to extend, because it gives us enough time to see whether or not he's somebody that we can rely on as a backup option, or if he's somebody that we need to look to move on, right? And I think that's kind of where we're at with Tommy. Like, Tommy, obviously, when he's fit, is such a good option to have. I don't think he's ever a starter for me, just because Tommy doesn't offer enough roundness to his game, in my opinion. Like, I feel like the type of player that Ben is the type of player that you need. That can do the going forward part, the inverting part, the defending part. I feel like Tommy does struggle in the final third, and he's a little on the stiffer side. So I feel like he would always end up being like the rotational option at the back that can play across the back line, but kind of like the Trossard of the back line, if that makes sense. Never a starter, but definitely somebody that we trust to come in and do the job, right? And can also offer different looks and give us something different, can shut down people, things like that, can play with both feet, good from playing out from the back. So, yeah, I feel like we're kind of in that place where Tommy, where we're trying to find out what his importance is going to be to the team. And giving him until 2026 gives us enough time to do that and also protect his value. So I do think that this is a really good deal for Arsenal. I think it makes sense. I love Tommy to death, but he needs to figure out a way to stay fit. And maybe that would come with maybe not running up and down the sideline that much. I don't know. Maybe his body just can't take it. He's a natural center back, and I don't think everybody can go from being a center back that doesn't have to do those shuttle runs into somebody that's up and down and up and down and up and down. So maybe Kivior coming into the fold will relieve him of having to do that so often, because maybe he could just cover the center backs. So I really rate Tommy. I love Tommy. I think he's great. I'm happy for him getting his extension. I think it feels like the right thing. It's just something that, like, we have to figure out whether or not he can maintain his fitness, because if we're honest, I want to say he's probably been available for 30% of the games that he could have been available for since being at Arsenal. I genuinely feel like it's like 30%. He's been out. He played like the first 4 months of his Arsenal career, then was gone. And then he was gone like almost all of last season. So we need him. We need him. The Arsenal perspective says, Tommy, please take yoga, Pilates, meditation, calisthenics, whatever it takes to stay fit. And I'm rooting for him, because I just feel as though he's so useful to us. But I'm never, ever, 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 ever going to change my thing on injury prone players. I just feel like they always end up hurting you a lot. So he needs to figure out a way to maintain. Diehard Gunner says, Tomiyasu is the best defender we have, in my opinion, better than Ben White at every position. It's all about fitness. I don't agree with that at all. I feel like you'll see Arteta's not going to start Tommy over Ben, in my opinion. I don't think so. I feel like that's more based on very small sample size of Tomiyasu looking good in certain games, but I think he has more of a chance of taking over the left back spot than he does of the right back spot. I don't know what it is about Ben White, but I feel like people genuinely don't get it. Ben White, I just don't see him ever. I just feel like Arteta rates him a lot, so yeah. And I still think Ben is better in tight areas, playing those triangles with Odegaard and Saka, which is very pivotal for the right-hand side. So even if Tommy is a better defender, 90% of the time, we're going to need Ben more than Tommy, in my opinion. So that's just me. Let's see. Chris Frazier says, if we stop using Tommy as fullback and used him as cover for Saliba Gabriel, he'd be like a new signing. I kind of agree with this too. I agree that maybe he doesn't need to be running up and down the sideline as much. So yeah, Travi says we will see how good Ben White is against tricky, speedy wingers. He's not as good of a defender as Tommy, but again, if we were just choosing based on defending, then yeah, Tommy would start. But we know that there is a little bit of something about Tommy in the final third that lacks, and anybody that's saying that that's not true is lying. It's come on, let's be serious for 5 seconds. Tommy, great player. Like, I rate him so highly. Probably, I think he is our best 1v1 defender. And Gabriel is second in that. But when we talk about all around and what's most important for our all around gameplay, I feel like Ben White gives us more. He can invert, he can overlap. He's better in the final third. He's better at the intricate passes. Like Tommy is not that far behind, but whenever he plays, I sometimes feel like he's not, I don't know, he's not loose enough. Nico says you still stand on Timber will replace Ben White. I feel like that's who he's going to compete with for the position. I do think that if there is anybody in the team that could take Ben White's spot, it would probably be Timber, because I never believed that Timber came in to play the left. I just feel like that's just how it happened. That's how it worked out, because Timber played on the right and the left during preseason, and it ended up being the case that we needed a left back more than a right back. But genuinely, I do feel like we bought a right-sided defender to play on the right-hand side. I don't feel like, come on. Like, he never really played on the left-hand side for Ajax. So I think it's going to be Ben and Timber on the right. Ben and Timber on the right, and then Kiwior, Tommy on the left. And maybe we'll buy somebody. I don't know. But I still feel like it's Ben White and Timber. And if there's anybody that's could take that spot, is probably Timber, because he's more well-rounded. He's more well-rounded. I feel like Tommy is more of like you use him for certain scenarios, but like an all-weather guy is probably more Ben. Does that make sense? Like, that's just how I view it, but like if we're going to Man City or some shit and we feel like, Doku is going to start or whatever, then maybe, yeah, Tommy would be the better option. But like 90% of the games, I'm probably going to start Ben, and then see how Timber does, because Timber is going to change it for us. Like, he's so good. Like, yeah, man. Fabi says, use Tommy versus rapid wingers. But can we also just say, that it's nice to have these conversations, because it wasn't that long ago that we were talking about like Mustafis and stuff and Maris, So I'm happy to have, conversations about Tommy and Kiwi and Timber and Ben and Saliba and Gabrielle. So whatever it is, I'm just happy that this is what we're talking about. And Zinchenko as well, because I still rate him, Artie says, let's not rush Timber in. Courtois got MSL just after coming back from ACL. We do not need to be rushing Timber back in. Philip says, Jess, people might be a bit surprised that both Tommy and Kiwi are 6'2". They are perfect center backs for Arsenal, in my opinion. They are both 6'2", and they are natural center backs, and I feel like they feel more like center backs than Ben does at this point. But I think that's what makes Ben so special, is that he's been able to like really mold into that right back role better than the other two. That being said, they both can do a job like at left back, at left-sided center back, So I'm just like happy to have these conversations. Like, either way, if it's Timber and Tommy, if it's Kiwi and Ben, if it's Ben and Timber, like, I'm genuinely going to be happy about it, because we've been in the mud in terms of defenders for a long time. Ayanle says, Tommy and UCL in the final third is not much of a difference. Check the stats. It's just we forget because he's sidelined a lot. I love White, but he sucks 1v1 on the wing. I don't know. I don't feel like when the right-hand side clicks as much with Tommy there. I just don't. And maybe we haven't seen it enough, but also because we haven't seen it enough, I feel like it's a little disingenuous to say that Tommy would be better than White, because he hasn't played enough. Like, but from what I've seen, Ben is better in those tight situations, in those tight triangles with Odegaard and Saka. Tommy's a little heavy-footed because he's a natural center back. That doesn't mean that he does poorly. I don't feel like there's a lot between the two. I still think Ben is more well-rounded than him, but I get the 1v1 winger thing. I get that, and like that's a main reason why when Tommy started playing well, I saw that there was a lot of slander coming Ben White's way, because they're like, well, Tommy's just shutting him down. But I seen Tommy let Koleosho knock him off the ball against Burnley, and, so it's like both players have their pluses and minuses. Both players have had bad moments in wide areas. Um, I just feel like Tommy is a little bit more of a on a certain dayer, if that makes sense, but he has things that are better than Ben, Like, Zinchenko is better on the ball than anybody else in our back line, anybody else, which makes sense, right? But you're only gonna use him in certain circumstances because he's not an all-weather player. And I feel like, if I'm honest, like, without have seeing enough from Timber so far, I feel like do I actually feel this way? I feel like maybe the more well-rounded ones are Ben and Kivior, and the more for certain times, but have, like, elite levels in something specific are Tommy and Zinny, you know? Because, like, Zinchenko is elite on the ball in terms of, like, finding those passes, and Tommy is, like, an elite 1v1 defender and physical monster, So, there's so many different things, and that's fine, Like, we all have our opinions. Martin L says, "You've forgotten the chemistry Tommy had developed with Saka 2 seasons ago when he had a good run of games." Definitely have forgot about it because it was so long ago. But what is it was that chemistry was that chemistry better than what we've seen with Ben White? I don't think so. Let's be honest. Whatever Tommy did in that first season, was it better than what we're seeing with Ben and Odegaard and Saka now? I don't think so. I think Ben White's form, so, like, right now is the best I've ever seen Ben White, and it's during the time that we've played the best. So, yeah. Clement says, "Big up to Tommy and Ben White for signing new contracts at the club. Next up is Georgie, which is being reported by sources that he was a 1-year extension on the table to add to his current contract, which I think is a good thing. I'm excited for Georgie to stay, which I never felt like I would feel that way, about Jorginho, that I'm like, we can't let him go. He has to stay, or at least I'd be like excited for him to stay. So I'm super happy about that for sure. Um, Kobda says, if we'd coped without Partey, Timber, Smith Rowe, Zinchenko, Tommy Jesus for some parts of the season is underrated. We have coped. We've done very well despite having some major players out, which is a testament to the players that have come in, which I feel like they do deserve a lot of credit. And sometimes I feel like we focus so much on who's not there and don't focus on the work that these players have done. That includes Kai, that includes freaking Kivior. It includes those players. They've done very well. Trossard as well. He's played a lot in this period of time too. So yeah. Artie says Benjamin is underrated even among Arsenal fan base. I feel like what happens with Ben is there's some players that we only focus on what they can't do. So because Ben is not as good as our other players in wide areas defending against like tricky wingers, that's all they focus on. But they forget how good he is in everything else. And so somebody that's better than him at that one thing automatically just gets put in that position despite them not having anything better than him in any other position. Nothing else, So Ben White is very much so I only focus on what he can't do, and I just that's not really how I operate. I feel like Ben White has so much. Could he be better 1v1? Of course he could. Against tricky wingers, of course. But I feel like if that's the one thing that he's really not that great at, but everything else is like like B plus and above, then he's probably a really good player. Ark says, I always rated White because I trust Arteta, but Tommy is hands down stronger 1v1 and overlapping. I don't think he's stronger at overlapping. I think he's just a better 1v1 defender. I'll be honest with that. I think Tommy leaves a lot to be desired in the final third. I'll be honest. Like, I really do. I feel like, no. Like, Fabi says, Tim Stillman has a theory that Arteta likes an adult on the pitch at all times, which makes Jorginho signing make a lot of sense. I think it does make sense. I feel like that's also why Arsenal fans need to remember we don't have a lot of adults in the room. And so we need to make sure that if we replace Thomas Partey, it kind of needs to be with somebody that has a little bit of experience, in my opinion. Nico says, for me, if you're a defender, defending comes first and everything else comes second. If what you're saying is true, then we should replace, freaking Raya with Leno. Would you prefer Leno in goal? than Raya right now? Probably not, because yeah, Bernd Leno is probably a better shot stopper because goalkeeping is first, right? But as an Arsenal fan watching Arsenal, what's most important for Arsenal? How you play out from the back because we're going to control 90% of games. So saying defending first, of course, all of our defenders are good defenders. That's I just feel like there's varying degrees to who's better at, defending in the box, 1v1 wide areas. Because Saliba's not very good defending in wide areas. He's not. He's better when he's central and when he's running back towards his goal and he can use his speed, where Gabriel's better out on the touchline. Everybody is better at one thing, like varying degrees at the back. But if we're going to sit here as Arsenal fans and pretend like defending is the most important thing for a back line when we control games 90% of the time, I think we're being disingenuous because, again, just bring Leno back then. Why have Raya? Raya's not a better shot stopper than Bernd Leno, is he? So just bring Leno back if goalkeeping is most important. It's just not. We know what we need. We need players that can control games, that are good in possession, that can do those little triangles, that can invert and be malleable and do different things. And Ben White is not a bad defender. What he struggles with is in wide areas against tricky wingers. But beyond that, he's good at box defending. He's good in the air. Like he can do all those things, so he's good at anticipating. So I just feel as though like we're being a little bit like, if you guys want Tommy in the team, you want Tommy in the team. I think Ben White is the starter until at least Tommy can show, first of all, fitness and that he's better in the final third. Foxy says, always important to have a mix of defenders with different attributes. Some games will suit Tomiyasu. I agree with that for sure. Neil says, Saliba is good in wide areas, but at the moment he's been shaky for a bit. See, I don't actually think he's good in wide areas. I think when you pull Saliba wide, he struggles a little bit more than when he's central. I think he has more control in central areas. When he goes out wide, you start to see a little bit of his, like, I think it's like the spatial awareness and knowing like where to be and stuff like that. But everybody is brilliant. Like that's all I'm saying. Tommy is really, really good. Ben's really good. Kiwior is really good. Everybody's good. They have different things. I just feel like Ben's more well-rounded than Tommy based on what I've seen. Fabi says right backs in this league are either defensive like Wan-Bissaka or overlapping like Ante Robinson or inverted like Zinni. Ben White does all three in one game. Respect him. It's crazy. Like I just feel like after these last like whatever since Dubai, like I still feel like the 1v1 defender thing is all that people care about. And that's probably like the thing that we come up against the least that needs to be worried about. Like if we need to worry about that, we have like Tommy to fix that for us. But like 90% of the time, we're not really dealing with like this tricky winger. We're controlling games. And I feel like Ben does that so well. And I feel like he's a good box defender. Like he does all those things really well. So I'm shocked. I'm still shocked. But I feel like Tommy, until otherwise, is a really top quality squad player, like Trini is saying. Mr. Happy says Benny Blanco is a brilliant player. Our fans suck sometimes. I don't want to say that I feel like people are hate Ben or anything like that, but I do feel like there's like this undercurrent of like, because he's gotten cooked a couple of times like by tricky wingers, because rivals have bantered us over it or whatever, because rivals don't rate Ben, you can't rate Ben. And it's just like, I don't know. It just feels a little bit like, I don't know. Saida says, but Ben White is defending, so why are we even having this discussion? I wouldn't say he's the best defensively, but he's not Trent. Definitely not Trent, not a stripper for sure. But let's see how Tommy does when he comes back into the fold, because he is still going to be super important to the team. Like we have some really difficult games coming up where we're definitely going to need Tommy to like close out games or maybe even start. You have, yeah, we definitely are. So I'm not saying that I'm not writing Tommy off or anything, and I'm happy that he's here for sure. Philip says White Timber right back combo is the best in the world for sure. Ben White is the top bracket with TAA and Walker. Only Hakimi is ahead of them. Neil says Ben White is more well-rounded because he's allowed to invert on the right, which has allowed Kiwior to defend. Ben improving other games. He's improving a lot every season, I feel, Ben. Um, I don't know what it's gonna take, for him to be respected. Like, I don't expect rivals to respect him at all. But our fans, like, I'm like, he's so good. I don't know. That's just me, but I'm glad Tommy's back for sure. Michael says, I like how well White and Saka move wide and know where to expect the ball. Ben is able to get forward and create width. Um, Martin L says, you can't not rate Ben. Come on, it's good that we have all these good options at the back. I want this amount of quantity and quality in all other departments. I think I'm not 100% sure people are like not rating him. I just feel like for some players it's just what they can't do, and we will put anybody else in their position if they're better at that one thing, rather than focusing on all the great things that Ben does, which he does a lot of good things, where, we have some players where we only focus on the good things that they do and we pretend like they have no faults. Like Ben, it's all about what he can't do. Saliba, it's as if he has no fault. If you say, like when I was saying that Saliba was starting to fall off, which was way before he really started to fall off, recently. And when I talk about fall off for Saliba, I mean just being like 5% not as good, which means he's still great, but like not his top level. It was like I said that Saliba was Mustafi. And that's not what I was saying, but he was really culpable for several goals, in the beginning of like our good run, Nottingham Forest being one of them. And also Liverpool at home. And if you say like he's not good in the air and he still needs to kind of like work on winning his headers and how to head them like instead of doing the pogo stick, like actually head the ball. If you say those things, like people pretend like you're speaking like a different freaking language. But Ben White, it's all about what he can't do. And I get that, because there's certain players in the team that like there was a period of time where people hated Ben just because they felt like Saliba would never get back into the team, So I get that some players definitely get more leeway, so that's just it. Jacob says, personally, I would like Saliba to be rested, but then who comes in for him? I don't think he can be rested. Like, I don't. We just lose so much when one of Gabrielle or him are not in the team. But I guess if you had to do it, you would have to I would go back to Ben and Gabrielle because they've actually played with each other before. But um, one of the like underrated things between the two of Gabrielle and Saliba is that they speak French to each other. And I feel like that's a little bit of a barrier when you throw anybody else in there, is that they speak French to each other. So, there's that. But once you put Ben next to Saliba, it becomes a little bit different, So and I think that's why at the beginning of the season it was like, oof, I don't really like this. As on paper, it looked okay. And some people were like, yeah, get your best ball playing center backs back there. Gabrielle's crap. And only to be like desperate for Gabrielle to come back in. Right. So I think I don't feel like we can rest Saliba. And the good thing is that he doesn't play for France. So this will basically be like him doing nothing. Like he's not going to play for France. Right. Um, but from now into the season, we just have to hope that they're both fit, because I just don't see any other pairing working for us in a very stressful back to back to back to back, like really like important games, if that makes sense. Let's see. Trini says we can't rest our two center backs. We really can't. Justin J says Saliba is 6'4" and jumps like he's the 6'4" toddler, privilege settings. Neil says totally agree. His decision making has been suspect. I'm hoping he's not carrying anything. Let's see. Martinell says, wow, Gabrielle speaks French. They speak French to each other. But remember, Gabrielle played at he came from Lille. So he learned a lot of his French there. And so they speak French to each other, which I think is a reason why, like, remember at the beginning of the season when we played Saliba and White, and there was that one moment against Nottingham Forest where Brennan Johnson got free and probably should have scored. I feel like there's like a lack of communication between the two of them, because not that they can't speak to each other, but Saliba's used to speaking French to Gabrielle and not English. And so there's like a communication thing. So yeah. But again, I love Saliba. But people, when you say that he's not perfect, will hear he's shit, and that's not what I'm saying at all, but he does have faults, and as a 22-year-old, you would expect him not to be perfect. So, yeah, he's I wouldn't trade him for anybody else. I wouldn't. Brian says, has your belief in the team changed over the course of the year? Also, what do you think is Arteta's best quality and worst? I feel like my expectations of the season and how things will end has not really changed, even though our form has gotten a lot better. I just feel like December was really fatal for us. That being said, my belief in the team in terms of like their ability to solve problems and have a plan B and be able to play in different ways and win in different ways has definitely changed from last season to this season. I feel like last season we were definitely a one trick pony, and the way that we played like was so good, and like the vibes were amazing. That being said, like if we couldn't do that, we couldn't win in any other way. This season, whether it's, scrapping or set pieces or whatever, my belief in us finding a way is a lot more like I feel a lot better about that this season than I did last season. My expectations of how the season will end is still the same. I actually feel like this team is better, but December. We just needed to win one of them games. West Ham, like, genuinely, last season's team was like Leicester in a way, in terms of like how there was like a big like luck factor and also like an unknown factor, to what we were doing. We surprised even ourselves at how good we were. We really should have won the league last season. Um, but and everything was flying in the back of the net. Like we were really overperforming XG. Like everything that Gabriel Martinelli touch or Saka touch went in the back of the net. It was perfect. But we didn't have it at the end. Where I think this team has the ability to go further and really battle to the very end and is a lot stronger mentally and physically and stuff. But it's just like the beginning of the season, the Fulham points, that sticks out to me a lot as like a real like missed opportunity. If you have two additional points, where are you? And West Ham and you know Fulham again. So yeah, it's interesting. But it's tough to say that I feel like this team is better when the points don't add up to that, but I genuinely feel better about this team than I did last season's team because I knew we were riding on luck. I knew we were riding on a lot of luck. This season, I don't feel like it's luck. I feel like we're genuinely super good, right? But it took us too long to get to this version. I think Arteta's best quality is his attention to detail, and he's not too good for anything. So I feel like Arsene focused a lot on the Arsenal way and focused on the way that we played and certain types of players, and he stuck with that for a long period of time with a very like reluctance to focus on other things. Where Arteta is not too good for any type of goal, whether it's penalties, set pieces, whatever. Throw-ins were even like super like attentive to. I think his attention to detail is his best quality. I think his worst quality is his ability to use his squad and to keep everybody involved to the very end. I still feel like there's a little bit of that to go. And we'll actually see from now until the end of the season if he's learned, because if he that's all it's about. Like that's all it's really about. From now until the end of the season is whether he can use his squad. Because we're good enough. We're good enough. It's just you need Jesus and Partey and them in, from now to the end of the season. You got to keep everybody locked in. So that's what I would say. That's what I would say, best and worst qualities. Last but not least, I just wanted to touch on the little bit of news around Miles Lewis Skelly, who is highly rated in the academy setup, is with kind of like Noweri in that category. I still feel like they probably like Noweri better, but MLS is in the vibes too. Arsenal see him as an inverted left back, like Zinchenko, and I found that to be really interesting because I'm like, Okay, so maybe there's a way in for him that could feel very like smooth. Um, Now I know some people will be like, but he's a midfielder, but like, how did what's his name? Rico Lewis. How did Rico Lewis get into the team at Manchester City? He kind of did something similar as like an inverted left backy type of thing. And then he started playing more midfield and stuff like that. So maybe they see him as something quite similar. And I would say this, like we're gonna talk about this tomorrow with Gunnar Lee and Diluted. But next season, I feel like we could carry one of the youngsters. I do. I feel like we could. I feel like one of the youngsters could be a part of the team, um, if they're good enough. And I do feel like probably Noweri is probably the closest, but maybe MLS too, because again, like let's say that Bayern did come in with a bid for Zinchenko and it was like let's say 43 million or something like that. You have to take it, but maybe you don't have to go into the market and buy anybody. Maybe you just integrate Miles Lewis Skelly and you also have another midfield option too. So I feel like um I would love to see that. Like obviously I'm not desperate for the team to be young and desperate for there to be like 50 youngsters in the team, but I feel like we could carry one, maybe two, mostly one, you know? Maybe it's Miles Lewis Skelly, maybe he goes on a loan, maybe it's Noweri, but especially with the type of deal that, I've read that Noweri is going to get, I do feel like that feels more like we're going to integrate you straight in than a loan, but I would be really interested to see those 2 in and around the squad. I thought that they looked good in preseason, like in that one little game against the German team, Nuremberg. I know it's Nuremberg, but they were fun to watch, so that'd be interesting. Philip says, "Hey Jess, would you consider inviting Alice Talks Football on the show? You two would be great. I love Alice. She's one of the best out on YouTube. She's a great United fan that actually has her head screwed on straight. So yeah, I think maybe I would. Yeah, maybe I would. MD Agency says, but we don't have squad depth. You mean for the Zinchenko thing? Um, but we do for left back. We have really good squad depth for some positions and not so great in other positions. Like left back, we have depth. Like we don't have a problem at left back. But I wouldn't really be trying to sell um like I wouldn't really be like desperate to sell Jesus, because we have some positions that he could fill up front. But if a good like for somebody that's like 27 that we know is kind of like, we're moving away from, if somebody offers you good money, you have to take it. What I'm saying is that like you don't want to sell them for peanuts, right? And so you have to pick and choose, but we have good depth at left back, so I would consider like a good bid for Zinchenko if we had, if it came in, that's what I would do. Chris Frazier says MLS and Noweri have genuine potential. Integrate them over the next 2 seasons and see what happens. Neil says cup competition as well. Want to see a youngster brought through. Cups are something that Arteta really needs to get a hold of. If we don't win that penalty shootout, we are having very different conversations during these next 2 weeks about his record in Europe and his record in cup competitions beyond the FA Cup that he won. And so that's definitely a room for improvement. I feel like we need to be able to be almost like a chameleon and be able to go in between like what we feel like is best in the Premier League and also be able to win cups. And cups are different. They're different, so and we still don't really have the juice yet for that. So that's something that he can improve on. Arca says, from the little I've seen of MLS, he seems very press resistant, but don't know much about his overall play. Maybe I can get somebody on that really knows the academy. There's a couple of people that really know the academy well. I think it's like Generation, like Halen Generation or something like that. Let me find him on Twitter. He doesn't do podcasts though, so he wouldn't come on, I don't think, but I kind of just follow their lead. Let's see on things. Next Generation Arsenal at Scouting Indoors. They really know the academy well. Also, secret scout. They know really well too. But they do more than just Arsenal, and then obviously like George too. He knows a lot too. Neil Deluded doesn't know shit. Like, no, I'm just joking. Deluded knows about the youth too. Maybe we'll ask him tomorrow. Oh, and just to let you guys know, when Deluded comes on tomorrow, we are a full court press. Okay. You guys are on my team and not his. Okay. I need backup tomorrow. Okay. So we are Team Jess, not Team Deluded. Okay. So just to let you guys know. Super Kai says it's the perfect time to sell Zinni as well because I believe he's going into the final 2 years. So you either have to put faith or renew, put faith and renew or sell while there's some value. Fair enough. Foxy says thoughts on Rule Walters Botman out for 6 months with ACL. So we need a new center back, desperate times. Okay, so you're a Newcastle fan. Too bad we don't have Rob Holding anymore. I'd love to give him to you guys. Let's see. Rule Walters. Are you guys being linked to Rule? That would be weird. But Botman is like was supposed to be your guy. So I don't know what to tell you. You guys will probably go and try to spend the money on Diamande now. I feel like that's your I've seen Newcastle are linked to Diamande, and that would kill me. So if anything, that's what you guys need to go do. Jordan Hill says, I don't know about that. Just DG has some good points. Hello, you guys. Come on, you guys. Be on my team. MD Agency says I would sell Jesus and Zinni. So yeah, but there's 160 of you guys in here. Make sure you guys smash the likes and subscribe to the channel. You guys, tomorrow at 4 p.m. UK, me, Goonerly, and DG are going to do a show. You guys are on my team. Remember that. And then also in the morning, you guys will go to Cannon Club. So a live show and a podcast. So make sure you guys support all the content, all that kind of stuff. I'm actually going to go record now and figure out what's going on with my contact because you guys, it's been like, it's so weird. Like it's actually been like fuzzing up. I don't know what's going on. So got to fix that. But super excited about the content coming out over the next couple of days. I think it's going to be so much fun. I love doing Cannon Club, and I also love doing shows with DG and Goonerly. So I think it's going to be amazing. So make sure you guys are here no matter what. Jagoon says we accept bribes. Fair enough. Fair enough. I got to figure out a way to bribe you guys. Did you guys be on my team? Fair enough. And currently, I see you asking about Curtis Shaw. I've asked Curtis Shaw a million times. He doesn't answer any of my messages, so it is what it is. But I'll talk to you guys later on or tomorrow at 4 p.m. Make sure you guys look out for the Cannon Club episode. It'll come out around 9 a.m., 10 a.m. UK time, so make sure you guys check that out as well. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.